Right.
All right, so we have the unbelievable privilege to be joined today by the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state of Mississippi, former general with the Mississippi National Guard, uh, son of the legendary Governor William Wilder, Mr. Bill Wilder Jr. We thank you so much for joining us today. This is our business law class here at Velma Jackson High School. We have a room full with us, and we're recording this for our friends at Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, and our YouTube channel. So thank you again so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule for us today.
Great. Glad to be with you guys.
Now, before we get into what all you've done in your career, we have to mention your late legendary father, who was the governor of Mississippi from 1972 to 1976. Really did a lot for our state. And before he was the governor, was the prosecuting attorney in the Medgar Evers trial. So just talk a little bit about what was it like to have a governor as a father, and what type of things did you learn about the state government growing up before you even went to law school?
Right. I think maybe it would be helpful to talk a little bit about his background as a prelude to
Sure.
the prosecution. But he grew up on a small farm outside of Oxford, or the students may know of Ole Miss, and he was severely injured when he was a sophomore in high school. He had part of his thigh blown off in a hunting accident.
Wow.
He was they were hunting for quail, which are very rare today, and there was a couple of stray dogs that were following. It was a group of guys, and one of them tried to get his quail, and he took his actually just got the shotgun for Christmas. He took it, hit him with the butt of the shotgun. The shotgun went off and blew off about half of his right hip. So he was bedridden for 6 months and
Wow.
had to stay in town. Back then, the road was a gravel road, and he stayed with relatives actually for about 2 years and finished high school. And the story later with that, there was in the group, it was a mixed group of white and black guys that lived in the country there, and it was a black guy that saved his life. It took him to the road and
Wow.
held down a driver. Now the rest of the story on that is he would later be charged with murder, and my dad would come and represent him, and that was it's a reported Supreme Court case. I won't go into that now, but so he finished high school, and he walked. It was about 2 miles from his father's house to what we call today Highway 6, and hitchhiked to Memphis, and worked his way through what we call today the University of Memphis. Back then it was Memphis State College. Yep. And worked his way through school. He worked in funeral home, and back then the funeral homes also ran the ambulance service, and so he said they got so good they could beat the police to the wrecks. But he worked his way through school, and interesting footnote to that: the reason he went to Tennessee is he thought he wanted to be a dentist, and Mississippi didn't have a dental school.
Ah.
And so to facilitate or accommodate his admission, well, during that time he decided he wanted to be a lawyer, so he came back to Ole Miss. But fast forward, when he was governor, one of his key initiatives, he wanted to have professional schools in Mississippi to accommodate Mississippi students, and they're a center of influence for learning too. So one of the early accomplishments was the establishment of a dental school, architecture school, and school of veterinary medicine.
Wow.
But that's another story. So he finished law school, came to Jackson, no money, no friends. He borrowed $400 and started a law practice. So that was interrupted by the Korean War, but he entered politics fairly early. At age 30, he ran for county prosecuting attorney in Hinds County. This is where the city of Jackson is located. And lost that race, but at 34, he got elected district attorney. And of course, as we know, 2 years later, Medgar Evers would be gunned down. And so early in his career, he was faced with a very challenging trial.
Wow.
The interesting thing about that, and I'm sure you've talked about it in school, but the James Meredith admission to Ole Miss and the riot that occurred September 30, 1962, had happened about 9 months before the murder. And so what you had here, you had a huge public event of Mississippi resisting segregation. Then you have a obviously a civil rights murder where Medgar Evers was shot in the back of the head, murdered in his driveway, and so you had the whole world watching Mississippi to see what they were going to do. You had the London Times covered the trial. It was actually about 9 months later, and so I really, in my opinion, this was sort of a watershed. Mississippi coming of age in the civil rights movement because it was a serious prosecution. They had the murder was June 12th, 1963. The first trial was in February of 64. It was what we call a mistrial, or there was not a complete verdict. They had a second trial in April. It was also a mistrial. The vote, as best it can be determined, got a 12-person jury with 7 for conviction and 5 for acquittal. Now, the effect of a mistrial is that the case is not over.
Yeah.
There could be another trial later. And so what happened in 94, he was brought to trial again because of, frankly, his own confession of the murder.
Yeah.
And so we call that newly discovered evidence. And so with that, Byron D. LeBecq was convicted and died in jail. But this was a big deal, and his 2 trials, he had a transcript made of the first trial, and largely the evidence that was adduced in the trial, there was 50 witnesses, 60 pieces of evidence was the basis or the foundation for the conviction that ultimately happened. Mississippi's come a long way since then. The jury that he had was all white, all male, because that was the only people they allowed to serve on the jury. So the fact that he kept the case alive and almost got a conviction was significant. So
Absolutely.
that was a big deal. And I think that most historians today regard that as a very significant watershed in Mississippi becoming a mature, full citizen, if you will, with the rest of the states and bringing equal justice to all citizens. So that was a big deal.
Absolutely.
So going with that, I think you had mentioned you wanted to talk about my career in law. So you might say that's where my career started, because I was 11, 12, 13 when all this was going on. And it was, that was a big event. And I enjoyed watching it. And so my legal career actually started in 1967 when I was 15. I think you probably got some people in your class now older than that, right? But so that was as the janitor in Waller, Pritchard, and Fox attorneys. So I cleaned the office up at night. So the young attorneys would be there at night working as you usually find in law offices. They have to do the hard work of the research. And so in visiting with these attorneys and looking at legal documents and being around the books, that was really my entrance into the legal profession, and that's what really drew my interest into it. And so I did the janitor work until I finished Murrah High School in 70 and went to Mississippi State and then Ole Miss Law School, and I practiced law with Governor Waller from 77 to 98 when I went on the Mississippi Supreme Court. And so just learning from him, if just a perspective, would be perseverance, because I saw him win cases, he'd go right back to the office. I saw him lose cases, he'd go back to the office, and he just never gave up. He kept pushing, and he was like the little engine that would never give up. And I think that in life, you're gonna have good days, you're gonna have bad days, but you need to work for the year and not for the day.
Absolutely.
And I would say if there was any one thing I learned from him, it would be persistence. And so, so I took office in the Supreme Court in 98. All of our judges in Mississippi are elected with the exception of city judges. Most city judges are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. Actually, in my last, close to my last 2 years of law practice, I was a part-time city judge for the city of Jackson, appointed by the then mayor, and that was a good background for the court. But so in my 21 years on the Supreme Court, I served the last 10 as a Chief Justice, and that is from the standpoint of deciding cases, I only have one vote as the other 8 justices have 1 vote, but you're the administrative lead of the court, and you make the agenda, and you provide leadership to what we refer to, or what I refer to as a fair and efficient administration of justice. And I think that's very important. Then we had a number of successful things. We started and completed a new courthouse. We began a public defender system. The state public defender became of office, the Office of Indigent Appeals.
Wow.
The post-conviction relief office was established. And for all of you guys in the computer world, I know your students probably have computers sitting on their desk. I'm not sure, but
they're all watching you on a computer screen right now.
How about that? We started the electronic filing system used by the courts today.
Wow.
And it was the interesting thing about that is really our congressional leadership, particularly Senator Cochran, was very instrumental. But we have they may be familiar with what source code is, your basic operating system in a computer and a computer program. We actually were able to get the source code of the federal system. And so we got it for nothing. We didn't pay anything for it, and we made all of our changes in-house. And so that was a big deal. We hosted the bicentennial of the legal profession, and that certainly was a very significant event for me, because the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, came and participated in our program.
Yep.
And it actually was the presiding judge in a moot court case. I know you told your students about moot court. That's sort of a practice for people that are not lawyers. It was actually one of the early law schools in the United States was the University of Mississippi, where LQC Lamar did the moot court system there. So we didn't start it here, but we were one of the early states, and that was a big event. So I want to talk about one case that I wrote the majority opinion on that would I think would interest the students there, but it was a case of Edmonds versus State, Edmonds. It was a young 13-year-old named Tyler Edmonds. This came out of Octavia County, and that is where Mississippi State is.
Yep.
So to give everybody a frame of reference, but he was charged with the capital murder of the husband of his half-sister. His half-sister name was Christy Fulgham, and he was charged with the murder of her husband. It's an interesting case from the standpoint of when he was brought into jail, and he gave a confession and said that he helped his sister murder her husband. And so I'm not sure what the theory of that or if she thought that she would get a lighter sentence if there was a 13-year-old involved. But anyway, he was tried as an adult. Now, everybody needs to understand that, if you get a speeding ticket, that's a speeding ticket. But if a crime of violence for a minor, even a 13-year-old, you're tried as an adult. So that's an important thing to listen. And he was tried as an adult. He was found guilty of capital murder and given a life imprisonment because of his age. His half sister is actually on death row. So her case is still pending. So we reversed the case, and it's a real interesting case. The court allowed some evidence and disallowed some evidence that prevented Tyler from getting a fair trial. I want to go over a couple of these things that I think would be of interest to everyone. One of them, obviously, when I said, how can a 13-year-old help his sister murder somebody? Well, what they said was that both of them pulled a trigger. Now, I'm sure on a rifle, and I'm sure everybody's sitting there wondering, how do you do that? And
all these hunters up here are saying that's impossible.
Yeah, so how's that possible? Well, anyway, that's what the prosecution's theory was, but they couldn't get him unless they could have him doing something as a part of the crime. And so they had a pathologist. That's a medical doctor that determines cause of death, pathologist. So the state actually asked the pathologist whether he thought it was consistent with the evidence that 2 people pulled the trigger, and he said it was. Not only was it consistent, it was more consistent than one person pulling the trigger. Well, we found that that was a legally impossible event for a pathologist to testify to. Because you remember,
Wow.
he's not looking at anything but the bullet wound. The pathologist cause of death, and there was no way that he could look at the bullet wound and say, "I think two people pulled the trigger." So
Wow.
that was one of the things that prevented him from having a fair trial. The second was his father's, Tyler's, and his half sister's father. He testified that Christy had come to him and asked to borrow a pistol because she wanted to kill her husband. Well, the trial judge didn't let that in. Does that sound important to everybody there? It sounds pretty important to me. But anyway, so we reversed that, said the trial judge made a statement. We call that a statement against interest. It's hearsay because it was not said in the presence of the person, Christy, but it's a declaration against interest that can be used against him. So somebody else can testify to what she said with that. The third thing would be, I don't even know if it's still on. The Montel Williams show, is that still on? I don't even
Not
know.
anymore, but yeah, that's before all of our before their times. I remember that show.
Yeah, it's kind of a talk show, sort of like I don't know, some of the talk shows. Anyway, he was Oprah Winfrey. Let's say, I think most people, I think she's still on. So anyway, so Montel Williams had actually had Christy and her husband on TV, and their you might say their marriage fight had become so well known that a national TV invited them to come to discuss it. And so during that time, they talked about the arguments they used to have, and Christy had had a baby fathered by somebody else while they were married, and he said that she was going to go to hell for it, and they asked him why he didn't leave, and he said, "Well, I love her." And so anyway, they kept that out. Well, that certainly shows the intent or the expression in a public forum that they had fights all the time, and there was at least a reason for her to want to kill. So anyway, we reversed the case. I wrote the majority opinion, and so Tyler, who had been when as Captain Murray, you don't get out of jail, so he'd been held in jail until the appeals were finalized for about 3 years. And he's free today, and he is a paramedic in Columbus, Mississippi, trained, no problem. So there was a valiant lawyer that took up his defense, and had he not had a good lawyer like that, we may not have ever seen the case, and Tyler may be in prison today. So there's always room for good lawyers. There's always room for that's why we have courts. That's why we have reviews by appellate courts. So I thought that particularly because of the age, that may be of some interest to your class.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because you guys aren't when you were on the Supreme Court, you guys were not the original trial court. You're reviewing cases that are already ruled on, and then say, yes, this person got a fair trial. Yes, this is fair. They broke the law here. They broke the state law, federal law, whatever. So it really is a court of final opinion, as they call it in the legal system. Right.
That's exactly right. I wanted to try to run through some other things on military career. I joined the National Guard out of Mississippi State. I went to ROTC and was in the Guard about 33 years.
Wow.
And retired as a brigadier general.
Wow.
My last tour, I was commander of what's referred to the 66th Troop Command, which is here in Jackson. And we mobilized, of course, 9/11. Everybody knows what 9/11 is, when the terrorists hit the trade towers and the Pentagon. And there was a general mobilization to try to suppress terrorism, particularly in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we mobilized 5 units, and first mobilizations we've had since Korea, and one of them was a Special Forces unit. And believe it or not, you can, sitting right there in Madison County, you can join special forces unit, jump out of airplanes and have all that sophisticated equipment, that specialized night vision devices and all that kind of stuff right out of Jackson, Mississippi. And you can do some big things and go around the world. And they did some big things. They were one of the first units in Afghanistan, and I remember meeting them on the airport tarmac coming back, and they were highly decorated, and our soldiers did a great job. We had another unit mobilized, an air defense artillery battalion out of Newton, Mississippi, and they had a real interesting mission. Nobody knew where this was going to go, if they were going to try another attack or anything. So they actually put this air defense artillery battalion in strategic places around the capital.
Wow.
And I remember that I went up on an office building. I can't tell you which one it was. And so I got up there. We had what's called a man pad. They shoot these air defense rockets off the shoulder. It's called a man pad. Actually, they're used today in Ukraine. It's a very sophisticated, lethal weapon. And so I looked down, and less than a block from us is the White House.
Wow.
And so they were providing the final air defense to the President of the United States.
Wow.
So, and that's, that's with us. So you can do some big things with your life right here in Mississippi and contribute to our country and our freedom. And so I want to say, I know we wanted to get into some other things, but I wanted to stop right here. And so we've talked about my dad that didn't have any money, that worked his way through school. And we talked about opportunities in the military that you can have, just like anybody else can have, and how you can contribute and make a difference to the country. And so the question is, if you're sitting there and say, well, that interests me, how would I like to do that? I'd like to be Chief Justice. If that guy can be it, I can certainly be it. So I agree with that. Well, the first thing you got to do is finish the class you're in right now. Right now. And you need to do the best you can, because if your goal is an A or B student, you can't wait and do that when you're a senior.
Yeah.
Every class builds on every class, and you can't suddenly be a scholar because I don't want to do it right now. You got to start right now, because right now, this day is the first day in the rest of your life. And if you want to do something with your life, then you need to start right now. And so, I'm going to give you a little story. Colin Powell, and this would be, Greg remembers, Mr. Tiger remembers him, but he was the first African-American or Black that was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This would be the highest uniformed person in the military. And after that, he served 5 years as Secretary of State, which is one of the highest civilian cabinet posts in the country.
He was the first Black Secretary of State as well.
That's right. So his parents came from Jamaica to New York, couldn't speak English. He didn't go to West Point. He went to ROTC, went through public school, and he rose to the highest military position in this country. And you say, he was asked this one time. He said, General Powell, Secretary of State Powell, what do you attribute your success to? And he said very simply, he said, I did everything I did as if someone was looking, because they usually were.
Wow.
So the message to your students there is somebody's watching you and everything you do, who you hang out with, how you spend your time, what you do with yourself. And so if you want to be Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court, if you want to be the commander of the 2nd Lieutenant Special Forces Battalion, then you need to start right now and act as if you're in that role, and perhaps that will carry you in that role. So that means who you're with, what you do, how you spend your time.
Wow.
And all these things, as you go, of course, everyone's familiar with the classified documents leak that is going on. It was a 21-year-old National Guard Air Force person that had leaked this. And so to get a security clearance, they look at what you do, and that includes you've got any kind of arrest, or what your grades are, or what you've done, or if you've been fired from a job. So all this stuff builds, and if your goal is to be the best you can be and go as high as you can be, you need to start right now in doing that, and looking and acting and speaking in that way. So
Yep.
that would be my one little something that I want to leave with the students here today. And
Now,
incidentally, go ahead.
no, I was going to say one thing I also really wanted to talk about before I get to these questions is, we have state elections coming up here in November, and then we'll have the federal and the Supreme Court elections for Mississippi in 2024. Now, the Mississippi Supreme Court are nonpartisan elections, so when people run for Supreme Court like you did, you do not run under a party affiliation. So I think it's even more important for young people to pay attention to who the person is running, to pay attention to decisions that are made, to pay we all know about the federal Supreme Court, the lifetime appointees by the president. Mississippi doesn't work like that. There are laws that are made and decisions that are made in that building that affect these kids for the rest of their life. And, I'm not smart enough to tell anybody who to vote for, but I think it's extremely important that these young people are informed that their vote counts when these elections start coming up, because we have 3 in the Central District that they either elect, re-elect, or vote out. So I think it's so important to pay attention to those decisions that are being made.
Yeah, it's and I'm glad that you're talking about the voting, because when a person becomes 18, they can register to vote, and really in a lot of ways, registering to vote is your passage into adulthood, because at that time not only you registered to vote, but you also go on the list for possible jurors that decide factual issues in trials. So, and there is no greater way that a citizen can be involved in our political process, if you will, than to participate in our court system, and that's something you can do when you're 18 years old. Yep. So I do encourage everyone to register to vote, to become informed in that. And so I was trying to figure out some. I ran across it's not a story. It's a factual occurrence of how a vote can make a difference. But in 2000, the year 2000, George W. Bush and Al Gore were in a runoff for president, and so it came down to the state of Florida. They were tied dead even, and it came down to who won the state of Florida. And the final outcome was that George W. Bush won by 537 votes. 537 votes. That's many more votes than there is in a constable race or House of Representatives. There's 25,000 usually in a House of Representatives election here. I know y'all, where you are, y'all may know Representative Ed Blackman. His district's 25,000 votes. He probably has 15,000 votes in his election. This is a presidential election nationwide. There's 537 votes. So the votes in your school probably would have decided that election, or that many. So that it is important, and we need to remember that the United States is different. There's a lot more countries that don't have fair elections than there are that do. And the United States really was sort of the forerunner. It was the first Republican government, if you will. That's where the citizens vote and elected representatives that then decide the laws. And that spread, thankfully, that spread over many countries in Western Europe, but there's still the vast majority don't have free elections. And so, and they don't have a constitution that's being followed like we do. So it's a fundamental right, and it's not a law that's required. It's an opportunity and a duty for you as a citizen to want to go vote. We need to hold our leaders accountable, and that's the only way we can do it, is be informed and go to the ballot box. And I hope that this summer that some of you there will engage yourself with a candidate, become involved in a campaign, go house to house or whatever you can do in the campaign. That's the best way to learn politics. Learn people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I would, and they're going to be looking for people. I promise you. So whoever your candidate is, they're going to be looking for smart young people like you to work. And so that's going to decide. You just, some of you are sitting there, what am I going to do this summer? Well, I've just told you, that's what you can do this summer. Get involved in a campaign and make a difference in your life and everyone else's. So what else, Mr. Pye? What else?
I do have some questions from the students, and I got some really good ones here. So this
Good.
first is Jakia Luckett. She's a junior, and she asked, what is the way the Supreme Court decides if they're going to hear a case?
Okay. Good question. We got two basic trial courts. You got what's called circuit court, which is criminal and civil, like car wrecks, and you got chancery court, which is more domestic relations. They deal with deeds, they deal with child custody, also with state. So that's your two basic. I'm not going to try to get more detail. And so from those two courts, every citizen has got a right of an appeal. And so that appeal goes to the Mississippi Supreme Court, and the Mississippi Supreme Court retains some and they send some to the Court of Appeals. Now, if the Court of Appeals makes the decision, then that is subject to a discretionary or by permission review by the Supreme Court. But everyone's entitled to have a neutral body look at the case and review it to see if it was right. Now, as opposed to the U.S. Supreme Court, now their cases would come from like the Mississippi Supreme Court, appeal from there, or from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, which is the federal intermediate court that has Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. So if you want to appeal from the Fifth Circuit, that would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But no one has a right to have a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. That's all by permission. They only take around 90 cases a year, maybe sometimes 100, sometimes 80, but I'm going to just say around 90 cases a year, but they're all by permission. So it's very rare. Lawyers go lifetimes upon lifetimes without having a case heard before the Supreme Court. And that's not unusual because of the size and scope of what they do. And they're looking at broad, constitutional issues. So that was a very good question.
Absolutely. Here's another really good one. This is Robert Branson. He's a sophomore. And he asked, is it hard as a Supreme Court justice to not let your personal political beliefs affect your decisions?
Well, you have to sit back and look at things. If a particular case is something that you've got strong personal feelings about, that you need to get out of the case. We call that recuse.
Okay.
So, and there is the Supreme Court does have rules and opportunities for the litigants to ask the judge to recuse. So, if they think that that there is some reason that particular judge would not be a fair arbiter of their case, then there is a way in the rules to ask for. And the usual the ways that a judge has to recuse is if there's he or she has a family member involved, or he has an ownership interest in whatever the subject of the litigation is, and there's some other things, but those are kind of easy to hear. But if the judge has shown some bias or partiality in his actions outside of the court, then that can be that's another thing to be raised. But I think it's in my situation, if I had something, say if I had a close relationship with the lawyer, I may not have been kin to him, we may not have owned anything together, we may not have even played golf together, but if I felt like my long-term friendship would affect my ruling, I'd get out of the case. So it's not hard to do, and it should be done in the appropriate circumstance.
Absolutely. I did not know that. That's very interesting. This is a good one. This is DeMarnez Griffin. He's a senior. And he asked, as you were growing up, did you ever feel extra pressure knowing that your father was the governor?
Well, it's well, sure you do. Everybody watches you. You know, it's not easy being a governor's son. But on the other hand, there's advantages to it too. So it's not but when the little rule I was mentioning to you about, you need to act as if someone's looking, because usually if you're the governor's son, they're really looking. So I had to try to behave myself, and I hope I did.
Yeah, and it's even tougher today because now everybody has cameras. Back in our day, everything wasn't being filmed, so it was a little bit easier to get away with stuff. But nowadays, that's impossible.
Well, they got cameras. They've got you got cell phones, and you can trace text messages, and you can see what you've been looking at on the internet. So
Yeah,
there's a lot. There are a lot, and
yeah,
there's cameras everywhere. I don't know
yeah,
if everybody
and as a
realizes that
judge,
there's cameras at a lot of major intersections today. So you just about can't go anywhere without somebody knowing where you are or what you're doing. I get tickled if I'm it I think the artificial intelligence is, of course, the latest thing now. And some parts of it I like. When I'm trying to spell a word, that artificial intelligence should jump up and help me with that. I think that's good. But I think that if I'm looking for a lawnmower, all of a sudden lawnmower ads will pop up on my phone. So I think all that's going on too. So you can't hide today.
yeah,
Somebody's watching A and B making records.
yeah,
So it's incumbent on all of us to be good citizens.
absolutely. I just got a couple more. This is Modesty Carmichael. She's in ninth grade, and she asked, "What is some advice you would give to someone who wants to possibly join the Supreme Court when they get older?"
Well, just what I said before. You need to finish the ninth grade. You need to do the best you can. You need to be an A and B student. You need to law is writing and articulate yourself. So being a good speaker is not going to get you there unless you're also a good writer. A good writer is not going to get you there unless you're also a good speaker. Of course, so right now you need to get an A in Mr. Pygot's class in the ninth grade. And business law is a great class. I would commend all of you, no matter what you major in, to take it in college, because it's good life skill, and the principles of it are underlying our legal system.
Absolutely.
And and then so to you as a ninth grader, you need to invest yourself in classes that speech classes and English classes and creative writing classes to get yourself ready for that. You need to try to immerse yourself in things that would contribute to that fund of knowledge as you grow up. You need to try to see if you can hang around a law office. If your mother or father or brother has had some contact with a lawyer, and if I had to, I'd go up to Ed Blackman. I said, Mr. Blackman, can I come in your office and answer the phone on Thursday afternoons? I won't charge you a thing. I just want to learn something. So that's
Yeah,
kind of that's what you need to do. But you've got to the basic fundamental thing is you've got to be a good student. You've got to be a good student, and that's B's if you can, and A's is even better, and that would be your start. So start and finish strong in the ninth grade, and that'll be a good pathway to finishing law school. And once you finish law school, of course, judges review cases. The case is tried in a court, so you need to focus yourself toward litigation in some part. Whether it's representing people in child custody cases in Chancery Court, or whether it's working in the district attorney's office, prosecuting people that break the law, or defending people that are charged with breaking the law. That's you're gonna need to be in a courtroom if you want to be a judge, because a judge is the moderator, if you will, in a court proceeding. In some cases, they actually decide the facts in the law. In others, they just instruct the jury to decide the facts, and they make the legal conclusions. But that experience in actually trying cases is fundamental and necessary to being a good judge.
absolutely. And she's one of our better students. I just think she's really interested
Right,
in the legal
right.
field. I just got one more from the students, and this is Brian McMurtry. He's a senior getting ready to join the Air Force. So he's getting ready to serve our country. So we're really proud of him for that. But he asked, have you ever had a case that has had a impact on you outside of your job?
Well, they all do. I mean, they all affect you in some way or another. You see your life unfolded in front of you. And this particular one that I mentioned about Tyler Edmonds, you just, you look at that and you say, I mean, that's why we got a legal system. If we didn't have
Absolutely
the checks and balances that we had, that those bad evidentiary calls by the trial judge would never be realized or reviewed by anyone else. So yeah, I mean, I mean, you go with you. The capital murder cases that I've had. I mean, you look at pictures of the victims, and it makes an imprint on your brain that you can't get rid of.
wow.
And when someone is executed, you think, I signed the last order on the execution, and even though we've never, during my time on the court, we never had someone executed where there was an issue of whether the person did it or not. There was other issues. There was mental retardation or something like that. So I never had to grapple with, did this guy really do it? Because we never had that issue. But that's with you. I mean, you think about it. You wake up at night, and so there's heavy stuff, and it all affects you. On the other hand, there's child custody cases that we've involved where the right person to have custody wasn't necessarily the legally best person, but it was the best person for the child, and you got the best interest of the child. That's a legal principle, always prevails in every opinion. And so in those cases, you say, I think we did the best thing for the child.
Yep.
Everyone wasn't happy with what we did, but the only person that we needed to worry about on a most important level would be that child. And so that's when you have, the personal self-satisfaction of, I'm glad the good Lord placed me here, that this decision was made, and I can look at people in the face and say, I think we made the right decision, and that we've contributed to democracy and to having a free country.
That's awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. It's just such all the amazing work that you've done, and you're so humble you wouldn't even admit to half of it. And your entire family is just such a great leaders in our great state. But before we go, just let these kids know, because obviously all of them aren't going to be attorneys and get into the law, but knowing this and being familiar with how your government works and how the legal system works is extremely vital to becoming successful, on top of being a great student. Because, I know when I was 15, 16, I was like, yeah, this stuff's never going to affect me. But knowing your rights, knowing the way the system works is so important, especially here with these young black kids at Velma Jackson.
It's and let me say that you can be a contributor without being on the Supreme Court, without even being a lawyer. There's a lot of in Madison County, you've got members of the Board of Supervisors. You don't have to, you have a high school diploma to do that. I want all the students to want to do more than that. But there's a lot of ways. Zoning in the city of Canton, whether you have a bar next to a church or whatever, you can participate on the zoning commission. You can, there's a lot of things that you as a citizen can involve yourself with the community to make it better, that don't necessarily require you to be a lawyer. So I hope that everyone there will make a commitment to make a difference in their community in some way. And I'm hoping that what was the ninth grade student's name?
Modesty Carmichael. Modesty
Carmichael. I hope that she.
Yes, sir.
I hope that she will in the future will be the Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court or better. So that was a good question she had.
I appreciate it. Well, again, thank you so much for taking some time for us today. The one and only former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state of Mississippi, Mr. Bill Wilder. Thank you so much for joining us
I
today.
appreciate it, Mr. Paggy. Thank you for having me, and best wishes to each one of you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
See ya.